Okay, today I have Marilyn Cooper with me. Thank you very much for joining me, Marilyn. So usually I start off by asking people about their teachers and their martial arts background. So could you sort of very briefly, you may have had many teachers, but sort of give us the most influential teachers in the main arts that you practice at the moment.
Right. So the past being starting off at 16 or 17, around in there, in Santa Monica, California, under a fellow named Bob Cook, who recently passed away. And then we visited San Francisco, Chinatown. He drove his van up with the kung fu students, and I saw the Chinese masters, and I just threw as soon as we got back to LA, I threw my clothes in a duffel bag and hopped a Greyhound bus and moved to Chinatown. So then I was under three masters for 1 year trying to figure it out because I was sort of like a kid in a candy shop. And I was under Brendan Lai, who was seven-star praying mantis. He's now dead. Actually, all of these guys are gone. And Guolin Yang. Well, YC Wang is still alive. He's Southern style Hung Gar. And Guolin Ying. So Guolin Ying was very mysterious. He was the only one with a book published, and it was about this weird stuff called Tai Chi. But I was pure Kung Fu, pure Northern Shaolin. And so I figured I had all my bases covered. It was Hung Gar for power, Praying Mantis for speed, and Northern Shaolin for mobility. But it eventually, I matured
Do you
into
still
Tai Chi.
practice any of those arts, or have you sort of moved on completely?
Very little. I
Yeah.
don't, as I'm closer to 80 than I am to 70. I just turned 76. So really,
And do you think those arts are maybe not that good for older people? Or
oh, absolutely. Tai Chi is what happened when Kung Fu masters got old and couldn't do Kung Fu anymore. Because Kung Fu is really fun. I mean, you know, it's it's fun. Fighting is fun and
yeah, I mean,
exciting.
do you think that MMA has really changed the kung fu scene? Because I think now maybe people think, oh, if you want to be a fighter, you've got to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. And do you think now that a lot of the people going to the more traditional classes maybe aren't interested in fighting or not as
That is,
much as
and especially the nature of the vibe in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, which everybody's really spiritual. I'm actually a kid from Detroit, and then I was in New York for quite a long time, and opened a kung fu school in New York City in Chinatown actually in 1980. So it's just a different vibe in California, but I'm really more of a mentally a back east person. So I love them. I mean, the martial arts is fascinating, and watching MMA is a guilty pleasure. But
but sometimes it's
um,
a bit boring that it was more interested in when there was different styles. Um,
there was always underground fighting. It was always an underground fight scene, so that stuff was going on all the whole time. And I used to meet those underground fighters, and then it just became legit. But there were some restraints, but this sounds horrible, but it's really true. Kung fu is not the art of fighting. Kung fu is the art of killing. You should not fight. It's a waste of energy.
do you know what
So
gong fu means in Chinese then? Do you know
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, for sure.
like a
Everybody knows
skill
that.
attained through hard
Right.
work, I guess. And I was sort of going to ask you about Chinese, because it can be quite controversial. English speaking Westerners using sort of Chinese terms, and often there's disagreements on things like qi and
Yeah,
um,
I know. That's just the
jin.
world.
Um,
Yeah, I don't.
so I noticed that you called yourself Sifu. I
Oh,
can
yeah, I
at
call
the bottom of
myself
the email.
Grandmaster. I love to get people to say, "Hey," and I'll just like, "Come on, yeah, meet. When do you want to meet? No weapons, please." I've had plenty of skirmishes, and yeah, I uninhibitedly call myself Grandmaster because I've actually have students who have opened their schools. So I feel pretty confident. And I have groups that are active now that are training what I've taught in Kathmandu, in Kampala, Uganda, in uh, Paris, France. So, I've spread, and I've I've surpassed my teachers in terms of knowledge. And that's badass to say it, but um if you can't stand on the shoulders of your sifu and keep going, then the art does not progress.
Yeah.
So just own it as you keep going. Your teachers are going to die, and if you keep training, you should become more advanced than they were.
And is it mainly about time and motivation, do you think, or is there much sort of so my cats?
I think it's a lot to
Yeah.
do with innate intelligence. As well, because I have plenty of colleagues or people that I brought into Kung Fu that are still like, oh, I'm looking for a Sifu, and I just found this really great Chinese master. And I'm like, what the fuck? You've been doing this for 50 years yourself. You know, it's not going to come down from somewhere else. It's in here and in here at this point. If
Yeah.
you don't know what you're doing, and I mean, it's always an adventure. Let me just say that right now I'm working with a woman that's 80 named Sangeeta from Kathmandu, and she's teaching me pramayana breath work, which is really hard because and so today, like if you ask me what I did today, I did pranayama breath work. I did qigong, paida, wudong qigong. I did tiger because it's lung, large intestine, and then I taught short form, the mainland 24, and then the first bit of our 64 movement form to my advanced students. So that's, and it's not always the same. I don't fully represent any one strain. The person I would say is most responsible for my level of expertise is Peter Kwok, who disappeared in 1984, which was the same year that Guolin Ying died. And he was Guolin Ying's, one of his senior students in Taipei. And they both came to this country in the early mid 60s. So Peter stayed East Coast and Guo was in San Francisco. So when I left San Francisco, Guo sent me to Peter Kwok in New York. So that's sort of how that happened.
So what's the main? Are you mainly Yang style, or you don't sort of?
It's an old Yang
Yeah.
called Wanping Yang. So it's a transition between Chen and Yang. And it has, so it's very external, that 64 form. It's very external.
And
You
what
just,
is it?
yes.
This is another question I've asked a few people in terms of what
Yeah.
makes something external, what makes something internal. Is it about if it's upper body muscular movement, it's external?
You can see what the movement's doing, and it's literal to the movement how you apply it. Whereas with as Tai Chi evolved, it became more internal. It became softer and softer. So
so for you, it's about how hidden the martial arts application is. What about Xing Chuan? Because it is described as being an internal martial art, but they're not that hidden.
it's all Fa Jing.
Yeah,
it's all Fa Jing. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of Xingyi in the 64. There's a bit of Bagua in the 64. Although to me, it never feels like Bagua. But, it's just, Xingyi is just any move from Tai Chi that you do with Fa Jing. I mean, metal is one of my favorite moves. We're in metal season right now. But anyway,
maybe I'm not in Southeast Queensland. I'm not sure. It's spring here and it's sort of subtropical.
It's fall and it just got cold today. That's why I have a scarf on, because I don't like to use heat. So I just put on more layers. Yeah, it got weirdly, it's going to go down, I think, in the 40s tonight. It's weird here. This is like a high desert climate. It's hot during the day and it's cold at night. I actually hate it. I don't like this climate at all. And it's Mediterranean light, which I don't like. I'm also a painter, and I have a quick one sentence I often say. If I were Van Gogh, I would have stayed in the Netherlands. I don't like Mediterranean light. I like the soft light of back east and Northern Europe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm originally from Europe, but I've sort of
Oh,
got
really?
used to hot weather now, so I'm not sure that I would be able to handle
I
a,
hate the hot weather.
a
What
northern
part of
hemisphere
Europe are
winter.
you from?
I'm from England originally, but I've not lived
Oh,
there since sort of 2006. So I sort of lived in
so you're
China
not a
for a
descendant of
while.
a criminal?
Sorry?
Isn't that what they say about people in Australia that they're descended? Because it didn't it used to be a prison
It
island?
was, yeah, no, it was. That's where the British did send if you stole a loaf of bread or something, they would send you to Australia for 10 years hard labor. But no,
So you have more of an English accent than an
yeah,
Australian.
yeah. I've only been in Australia for about 10 years, so I'm maybe more English than Australian with
Well,
my
you know
accent.
that English podcasters do very well because everyone loves that accent. So I expect a lot out of you.
Hopefully. So I was going to ask you sort of about standing. I saw from your YouTube channel that you sort of did a lot of Yiquan, and a lot of people might be quite skeptical of standing postures, both sort of for health and for martial arts. So and I think you did. I quite liked you described it as being an austere practice. I quite like that characterization of standing, and I guess also that maybe there are a few different approaches to standing. I guess the Yiquan one, which I saw, there was sort of like 5 minutes in one posture and then 5 minutes in a different posture.
Correct.
So I'm curious sort of to get your take on if you were going to sort of try and sell standing. It is easy to learn, but it requires a lot of self-discipline, perhaps,
Yes.
to do
Yeah.
standing practice.
All the students who are the best have a standing practice. So, I mean, I'll try to explain it. It's like the form inside of the form. So Guolin Ying was a direct student under WangZhanZai. So he was the guy that originated standing, and
Would
his
that have been in Beijing or?
um,
He's
I
quite a controversial
don't
figure,
know.
WangZhanZai. I don't know if you know much about his life story and the history of him, especially within.
I've read those old news articles, and I know Guo studied with him when Guo, I think he must have been in his 20s. But Guo had us doing only this one that you see him in the pictures with the
Sort of
arms
hugging the tree, sort of a very high hugging the
on
tree
one
sort of
foot.
posture.
So I have the feeling, but oh, hi, cat.
It's a Manx cat. That's why it's not got a tail. It's sort of an unusual breed of.
Oh, wow. Looks like it got slammed in the door.
No, it's she's sort of a little squashed up cat. He likes
Oh.
joining my
Well,
podcast.
anyway, so I don't know if have you ever read the book by Jan Diepersloot, Warriors of Stillness?
I have a long time ago. I think he sort of did a few versions of it, didn't he? But I have.
Yeah, part one, part two, maybe part three. I've read both, but the part one's the best. But if you look at WangZhanZai, he was 20th century, so there's photographs of him.
It would have sort of been maybe 50s,
Or
early
maybe it was
60s.
one of his students. It might have been one of his students. So it looks like maybe he demartial he took the fight feeling out of it because of the communists.
There's one interpretation,
spiritual.
yeah, that it probably wouldn't have been able to kind of publicly teach a martial arts class in
Right.
China at that time. But also, I don't know if you know about this. Obviously, there's Guo Yunshen was his teacher, and he I guess claimed to be his successor, the inheritor of the system. But if you sort of do the maths, WangZhanZai would have probably been around about 13 when Guo Yunshen passed away. So a lot of Guo Yunshen's older students weren't very happy with WangZhanZai claiming, hopping above them in the lineage. So I've heard lots of stories that he was essentially sort of run out of Shanghai in the 1930s by sort of Guo's older students.
I've never heard that.
And then I think also during the Japanese occupation of Beijing, he sort of was linked. I wouldn't say a collaborator. Maybe he wouldn't have had much choice whether to collaborate or not. But he taught some Japanese students and was maybe did there was rumors that his sort of martial arts school did a little bit of policing on behalf of the Japanese. So
Ugh.
he's sort of quite a controversial figure within.
Yeah.
So it may have been that he had the full system from Goyun Shuan and decided, I'm just going to do the health bit. But it might
How
have
much
also
did he
been
got
that
to
Goyun Shun only taught him the health bit because he sort of came to him as sort of a sickly a 9-year-old. But I think he was definitely had a reputation as being a braggart, and I take his own biography of his life with a little bit of a pinch of salt. Maybe there's a bit of
WangZhanZai,
um,
not
artistic
his uncle.
license. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's a long time ago, so it is all
Yeah, who
speculation at
knows?
the end of the
Who
day
knows?
and gossip.
It's worth experimenting with. It's less boring than seated. I mean,
I mean,
so if
it was
I
actually the
practice,
first type of my first thing that I did. I got a buck. I think it was Master Lam, a Hong Kong guy, Master Lam, and he had this power of stillness or something like that. And it had these postures, and that was my very first introduction
right,
to the internal martial arts. So, and I've sort of come back to it. But when I lived in China, the Shingy guy, he sort of taught it quite differently. He was very much, he sort of did 20 minutes in one posture and then had you doing just that for 3 or 4 months. And when he felt you could do that posture really well, then he moved you to a more demanding one. So he was sort of just sort of 20 to 25 minutes in one posture, but then gradually increasing how demanding the postures were. But my current
that sounds good. That sounds good.
but my
Sounds
current
like
teacher's kind of the other way that he sort of does the very easy sort of Wuchi posture, but then does it for a
Buddha.
long time. So my current teacher, he sort of
Oh,
does
your friend.
a very easy sort of low-handed posture, but for
Right.
a long time. So I guess I'm curious to get your approach is more sort of the traditional sort of Yiquan, 5 minutes in one posture and then 5 minutes in another
Well,
posture.
my students, this morning we did it for half an hour. So, if you dump it on beginners, sometimes they just never come back. So I try to
Yeah.
get in on them gradually. But the really devoted students practice standing. And I
And what would
learned,
you say would be the main benefits that they get? I mean, a lot of people might say, "Oh, you shouldn't be sparring; you should be doing bag work or sparring." How would you sort of sell it, maybe to a martial artist, or why should they invest? What do they get from standing? Is it mainly
I
structure?
think it would be hard. It's a hard sell. I mean, if you ask people who are laborers to just stand there and hold up their arms, or weightlifters, they just are like horrified and their arms are killing them and stuff. So, but then I've had students who have never done anything physical or just hiked around, they're not particularly gym rats or anything, and they love standing. And those are always the ones that are the most devoted to Tai Chi. It's sort of a measure of a person's will. So, intent, mind intent, Yiquan, mind intent, fist. So I learned the most about it from David Chin, who died a few years back. And he told me what to think about while I did it. Guo had nothing to say. Guo didn't have much English at all. But
So, what kind
David,
of things would you be thinking about as you're holding the posture? Then I think I did watch your video, actually, the David Chin video. So I did.
okay. So six
I guess I
directions.
kind of know. You talked about the 6 directions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then the way I get students up, so down in the feet, up the crown point up to infinity, through the center down to infinity, forward into infinity, eyes gaze straight ahead, and backwards into infinity, and then left and right infinitely. So there's a constant feeling of expansion, and that when you go to do the form and you're trying to be in Pung and feel that energy ball, you've just stood there feeling it for 20 to 40 minutes. So I have a memorization tool. So when I relearned Yiquan from my junior brother, because a small group brought some traditional master from China to the West Coast. and because people were only doing that number 6, the one from Guo.
maybe the most famous one, I guess. That
Yeah, the tree hugging one. So he taught 8 postures, and other people have come along down the pike with that. So, and it looks like 2 triangles, 4 circles, and 2 squares. So it's 1, 2. Wait, so those are the 2 triangles. The first one is like, you got to be kidding. All you do is rotate inward. The only thing I've changed, you just rotate so slightly.
yeah, I hadn't come across that it's essentially the same posture, but just kind of
not so much. So if you make your hands go flat to you, your forearms are going to twist. Fingers equidistant, and let them be relaxed and soft. Don't let them flail open. This is one plane. And now make your palms face your face. Rotate in. So you feel your forearms twist.
Yeah.
So you hold that for a bit, and then you just release the twist. And your pointer finger is eyebrow height. And that's and then
it is it's the perspective from the camera that it is.
Right. So it's flat, and then it's just like an eighth of a turn. And that's when you're thinking, what, are you crazy? That's because it's the tiniest movement. And then you go around the circle and you hold the tree at waist height. Make sure your elbows don't collapse into your torso. Your elbows are in front of your rib cage. They're in front. So the direction the elbows points are is very important. So your elbows are pointing out, right? And your fingers are pointing towards each other. Your fingertips are 1 to 2 fists apart. And then you bring it around like you're cradling the South Pole. So again, keeping the elbows in front of the body. Then you very slowly come through number 3. And then you go through what's going to be number 6. And this becomes number 5. So number 5, the fingers are across from the eyebrows. And then you go to number 6, which is the hugging the tree. And you're trying to not let the elbows collapse. You're trying to keep that round, like you're hugging a barrel. You could say this, like you're hugging, let's say, Canada and, Russia.
So if you had students maybe who had a lot of tension in their shoulders, maybe they weren't able, some people actually aren't able to raise their hands above their head, would you sort of start them off on the low postures, or would you encourage them to kind of fight through that?
They'll never get up there if they don't fight their way up there. They won't get up there.
Yeah.
They'll just be stuck down here. No, I would encourage, you need to get massage, acupuncture, paida, all of those sort of things if you want to have the full range of motion. My body is a mass of injuries. I have so many injuries and so much inflammation, is ridiculous. But somehow there's still chi flowing, and I'm still fascinated with this, and I just plow through it.
What is chi to you? I've asked most people actually, what is chi? If you were to offer a
positive life force energy.
Yeah.
And
can this be used for? Is this just a health thing, or can it be used for fight? Can I knock someone over with my chi, or?
No, that doesn't.
You can't leave the body. Have you sort of had any experience with any masters, maybe with sort of, I don't know, supernatural like powers? I guess with Wu, that was part of what I was getting at. Maybe the footage of the sort of the 80-year-old Chinese man who can hardly moves and pushes the student back, 10 meters. Have you sort of had any? What's your take on this?
I'll tell you my experience with this sort of thing. So, you have to be stiff to get bounced off like that. Because I remember when I was learning the Yiquan from Henry Look, who's a person that was my mortal enemy when he was alive. I hated that guy. He was terrible, and he manipulative and did bad things to people behind their back. He was, but I still wanted to learn the Yiquan. I didn't know how bad he was at that point. So I was at a tournament in Baltimore, the Baltimore area called Wushu. It's a big deal every year, and they have Lei Tai. And he was teaching an Yiquan workshop, and I really wanted to go to it, even though he was my junior brother. I was like, this is interesting. So then he was having people come up to him, and but giving him a little bounce. And so I came up and just engaged with him. And then when he pushed me, I just received it because I practiced Tai Chi all the time. I wasn't going to fake it.
Yeah.
And he got mad at me. He got mad. He said, "Stop doing that Tai Chi stuff." And I reflected on it later and thought, oh yeah, it's just bullshit. If you know Tai Chi, then you just receive force and recycle it back into. I didn't fudge. I didn't strike him back. I just melted and his force dissipated. That's all. I wasn't
But
trying
do you
to
sort of get the impression that maybe he encouraged his students to make him look good in that sense?
Of course.
Yeah.
And then, after a while, he stopped doing those exhibitions because everybody figured out that anybody can do that bullshit. So they stopped doing it. But I can send you videos of, well, the person, yeah. I mean, that.
Do you think Chinese martial arts is particularly susceptible to this kind of malarkey, I guess? Or do you think it's all martial arts have this? Or
well, I think, who were you interviewing? You were talking about what's his name? What's that guy's name that has Man, Heaven, Earth?
oh, the Adam Misner, I guess, is
Adam's got a bunch of flunkies that just go get bounced off him. I mean, it's like kindergarten Tai Chi, It's like, sheesh. Every time I see people do that stuff, it pisses me off. I've stormed into workshops. I've been kicked out of organizations for this because I've stormed up to the presenter and say, "Why don't you teach them the counter?"
Do you think it is just marketing? That obviously it is quite difficult to make a good living out of teaching Tai Chi. Is that the way you see it? Just sort of selling a supernatural powers in a way, selling a lie.
I got a secret, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to do this trick on you all the time. That's ridiculous. Magicians.
Yeah.
And see if you stand behind the magician. It's just
in a way, I guess a magician can still be very talented and entertaining. I mean, you know that it's not real, but you can still.
To their credit, I was mystified for many years until I was mystified, and I can tell you a pivotal experience. When I first moved back east, I used to just go in the park, and I was in my 20s then, and really very fit, and I would spar with anybody. It was Central Park, it was the 70s. It was kind of a free-for-all. Bruce Lee was still alive. And people would meet. I'd be training and people would just come up and say, "Want to spar?" And I'd say, "Sure." And it would just be kick, block, light contact, jumping in and out, just nothing like a real MMA fight or anything. Everybody was controlled because nobody wanted to hurt anybody. So, but then I would occasionally bump into a Chen Manching disciple because it was the 70s and they were around then. And I would come in with my straight line attack, and all of a sudden I'd be moved over and I couldn't tell what they did. And they had beards and pot bellies and looked out of shape. And I was just be like, what? I don't get it. I don't get it. And somehow my brain just couldn't register that if you come in like a freight train, all they have to do is go, and you just go off.
And who do you think were the better sort of disciples of Chen Manching then? Can you remember any of the names?
Yeah, Patience Tai Chi, Bill, they're all my friends now.
Yeah.
I know quite a bit of them. Bill Phillips has Patience Tai Chi. I didn't meet them then though. I was still mystified because I'd only done Tai Chi I'd read his book, and I'd only done it like a cool down. So then I had to learn 18 Shaolin forms under Peter Kwok before I could even get to the Tai Chi system. And then when he taught short form, that was easy. And then he taught the 64 as he interpreted it from Guo and Yang, what he learned in China. And I learned it in 2 lessons, 2 1-hour private lessons, because it was in some fold up there because I'd been doing it as a teenager. So it was like, oh, this felt familiar. This felt. Anyway, but I didn't really know that all the softness was getting to me or meant anything, but I kept practicing in good faith. I do all my Shaolin forms and then my Tai Chi, and then I was in what is that park near NYU on a break from art school when I was 30. So this must have been 1980. And people would always come up and say, "Want to spar?" Because there I was in a kung fu outfit, jumping around.
And did you find sort of as a woman you were treated the same, or were you kind of treated a little bit differently?
Absolutely. It's New York, buddy. Yeah. Yeah. I full out fights straight up. So when I won some, I lost some. So I have scars to prove it. But this young girl came up to me. I mean, she was probably about my age, a little bigger, a little heavier. She was a black girl that doesn't matter. And she was sitting on a park bench and watching me. And so she somehow mentioned that she did I think she said her style was Taekwondo. And I was doing Kung Shaolin and Tai Chi a lot. And still couldn't figure out, like, what is this real? This stuff you read in the books, And she shifted back to give me a high kick, and I just grabbed her wrist and pulled her down gently and never let go of her wrist, and she never hit the ground. And then I just lifted her back up, and she just looked at me and she started crying, and she walked over to the bench and put her face in her hands. And it was a mystifying experience. And then but that was Tai Chi. That's what that was. I stuck and I felt her, and I didn't want to. So I think that women, this sounds sexist, but I don't like to fudging people. I've been fudging a lot because guys don't seem to have that same, like, one of my old training buddies used to fudging me in the boobs, and I used to get lumps in my chest when I
Well,
was.
that's what obviously if I do push hands with women, I don't want to kind of touch
He
them
had no such
inappropriately.
reputation.
Yeah.
And I've also had this really pissed me off. This happened within a few years ago. A guy who's a qigong master and likes to think he knows kung fu, and just because he wanted to show off in front of a whole bunch of people, and he claims to be spiritual. I'm not going to mention his name. We were doing push hands, and he grabbed both wrists and yanked really hard. And I have a lot of torn tendons in my shoulders, which I have to work on constantly when I stand. Just tremendous amounts of injuries from that. And then he did it again, and he laughed because I should have thrust downward. And then I know what I should have done, but he caught me by surprise and yanked me twice. And then, the students were all gathered around. So he was like, whoa, I got her. Anyway, so, it's, I never do that to people. I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy.
Do you think it's a bit of an ego thing? Obviously, if I'm pitching with a
Totally.
guy, I'm not afraid of losing, but maybe if it was a smaller woman, I wouldn't want her to be able to push me around in a way
Well,
that.
you know what? Once I brought a very small woman to do a workshop at my class. She's from Arkansas. She's really good. She's a push hands champion. And we were pushing hands, and there was a cement floor, and she made a mistake, and she fudged me, and I lost balance and went over backwards, and luckily did not bang my head, and she was very apologetic, but she just felt an opening and went for it. But she was used to competing against men, so I wasn't mad at her. So luckily I tucked and my head didn't flail back. But yeah, I mean, sometimes unexpected things happen, male or female. Okay.
Okay, thanks for coming back, Marilyn. You sort of got cut off midstream there. So I think we were talking about push hands and women in push hands, and I guess most of the people I push with are sort of middle-aged men. But I know that you sort of teach push hands to sort of children in schools and older women. So I guess I'm sort of curious about
Well,
how do you explain push hands to people maybe who don't have an interest in fighting and martial arts, and that you're doing it
I
as
make
a
them if they're in my
meditation.
class, they have to do it. If they're in my, there's some women are timid and squeamish, and other ones are feisty and enjoy it. It's just different personalities. I don't really teach push hands to kids, which is actually based on Tai Chi, Qigong, standing meditation, Shaolin, and Bagua. But I can't say all that, so I just call it the Tai Chi Peace Games. So you can see all about that on my website.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I guess maybe the main market for Tai Chi maybe is sort of in a way. I wouldn't say calisthenics for the elderly is maybe a bit too derogatory, but maybe more health, health for older people. You disagree with that, or
Health, health.
do you think
I
most
don't
people
even
come
think
into a
Tai
Tai
Chi
Chi
is.
class are not looking to fight? They're looking to become
I don't
healthier.
think they. I actually don't think they quite know what. I don't think they know what they're
Well,
getting
I guess a lot of
into.
people expect it's just going to be form, don't they? They think it will be sort of silk pajamas and relaxing Chinese music and doing the form. Um,
That would never have appealed to me. But yeah.
I mean, I guess
I
within the Tai Chi community, there's a lot of sort of disagreement over what we should be doing in Tai Chi classes and um, what constitutes good Tai Chi.
well,
Or
are you? Do you teach?
a little bit. I have taught. I'm not really at the moment, but I have taught a little bit. Um, Maybe I have one student at the moment, but I have taught, and I have sort of taught as my job as well. I used to be an English teacher in China and
Oh,
Saudi Arabia, so I have taught,
oh,
but I'm not currently an active Tai Chi teacher. So
okay. So I've I've been teaching Tai Chi for over 55 years and Kung Fu. So I know a lot about teaching. Um, and what it takes to sustain a group and sustain their interest and meet their needs. So I currently live in one of the wealthiest communities in America, but I live in subsidized housing for low income seniors because there's a lot of social justice and progressive politics in the Bay Area. So I'm very fortunate to live here. But in previous years, I've always lived a very hand to mouth existence. I remember teaching a private student, maybe this was in the 70s, because that's just how I fed myself and paid my rent forever. And he said, "Oh, geez, I don't have any cash. All I have is plastic." And I said, "Plastic? What's plastic?" I didn't even have a bank account. I was really kind of an off the grid person for a long time. So, I've sort of re-entered society, and once I got all my paperwork figured out, it turned out that I actually qualified for certain benefits and was, you know, because of a friend who was a social worker, I got into this very groovy place. And just across the park is a beautiful community center that pays my nonprofit 70% of the tuition. And it's a wealthy community, so the people pay a lot for lessons. And, I have one student's 86. I do have some middle-aged students, though. So I'm teaching people, and you will find this if you become a teacher, where you're going to have beginners, advanced, intermediate, in good shape, in poor shape, coming home from the hospital after a heart attack, and coming into class to regenerate themselves. So, and that is the classroom I'm faced with, and yeah, and it's always fun for me. It's always exciting, and I empathize with the elderly students. I've had 2 hip replacements. And let me just also say that Tai Chi and Kung Fu training is not really that healthy. The Wushu teachers retire at 28, 30 in China to just be coaches. It's really hard on your body. there are a few exceptions. I mean, Jet Li looks very ill now, and
I've heard that he can hardly walk. I've heard that he's in a
yeah,
really bad way.
it's really not healthy to think to you're much better off having a personal trainer in a gym. It's much safer if you're not
Yeah, I mean, I sort of have been
not as
doing a lot more
fun.
gym work at the moment, but I guess I had some knee surgeries and my muscle wasted away, and sort of going to the
Yeah,
gym was sort of in a way more effective than Tai Chi for
that's
building
right.
up my leg muscles.
That's right.
Um, but I guess where I am, I think most of the Tai Chi classes, um, there's no push hands, there's no applications, there's no
Oh, really? That's a
bar. Yeah, I mean it is, and in a way, I sort of feel there is definitely a place for helping older people with sort of gentle qigong, um, but
well, I don't. I mean, we did this morning. We did Wudang Qigong for the fall, long large intestine, because that's the season. And then we did warm ups, and then we did short form, and then we did long form. So we didn't do any push hands this morning, but it depends on who shows up. Today was one of my bigger classes, so I had to juggle and meet a bunch of people's needs. But if you really look at the nature of form, uh, it's just a recipe for RSIs, repetitive stress injuries. And in general, it is not a formula for good health. Not really. It's something that elders can do because they're not embracing this as their whole lifetime. So if you come upon it when you're old, you can move very slowly and carefully, and it will help your balance. And your range of motion isn't as big, and you don't sink as low.
well, I'm quite surprising you were recommending older people go to the gym. I thought you would say come to my Tai Chi classes.
Oh, I should
That
do. I
perfect.
think people should cross train.
Yeah.
Definitely cross train.
And do you think there's sort of a bit of a stigma with that, sort of, especially within Chinese martial arts circles, whereas if you have one teacher and then you go to another one, maybe he will lose face if he thinks,
I'll lose money.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was up to Sing Yi, and I just finished the Tao Tai Chi system under Peter Kwok, and I was in my was I early 30s, and I sneaked into New York and went to a Sing Yi class because I was so excited. And then the next week I was on, my private lessons with Peter Kwok, and I never told him because he would have been pissed. And I had to admit his stuff was better. He was from Shanghai. He was a really cultured guy. He got a lot of that the stuff that's been codified by the Chin Wu, the Jing Wu,
The Chinese Martial Arts Association or something. Yeah.
right, right. All that stuff in those booklets with those little figures. So that he was during that era when that was coming up. And he first learned from his father and his uncle. So he learned from a young age. And he taught in Wayne, New Jersey for 15 years. And then he kind of flipped out and disappeared with
I'm
this
curious,
whole
have you ever taught Xingyi Chuan? So I guess I studied Xingyi Chuan, but I guess it's so um I'm not what word should I use? Nobody knows what it is in Australia. So that if you sort of open a Xingyi class, you've kind of got to explain what it is. And
well, it's all Fa Jing and it's really fun. I mean metal's my favorite thing, but metal conquers wood, and there's fighting forms and 12 animals, and
I
it's
guess
really
maybe I sort of feel there's almost not much of a market for it. That a lot of the people, the kind of people on the Gold Coast who come to Tai Chi classes, aren't
yeah.
looking for
Yeah, there's far
that gym.
fewer
Yeah.
people that you're going to attract to the singing class. That people haven't heard of it, or it's also ugly. I remember when, I'm an artist and I love Shaolin, Northern Shaolin, so beautiful, and the Tai Chi, so, just the shapes, and yeah, I have very visual orientation. Then when I saw Sing Yi, I was like, ugh, it feels mean and ugly, but I came to love it after a time. Just had to practice it, and then you start to appreciate it. It's very invigorating.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've got any more questions left for you. I guess meditation was another thing that I was going to ask about. I think you maybe your background in meditation was more sort of, I guess, Taoist sort of qigong stuff. Well, you had mentioned about doing some breath work from
Right.
Kathmandu. What maybe a lot of people don't really they they use the word meditation and they say, "Oh, what type of meditation do you do?" And they sort of have no idea. If you sort of able to maybe briefly describe maybe the differences between, I don't know, different schools, Buddhist and Taoist meditation, or I guess I'm mainly from a Zen background. I guess I have had some
Yeah.
exposure to Qigong and Taoist meditation, but I guess I know most about mindfulness, Zen meditation, where you're just sort of listening to your breath and trying to be in the moment, I guess. So again, maybe quite a difficult thing to teach as well, meditation, or quite a
Not
personal
really.
thing, perhaps.
Well, not really. I mean, I do teach it. So I,
And do you
I
teach what
yes.
styles do you teach, and how do
So
you
I
describe it?
learned I learned Zen Buddhist meditation when I was much younger, and I've taught it, and then I learned more of a Taoist approach. But this, so the way I like to explain this to my students is that pure Buddhist meditation is all mind. It's all mind. And when you're doing Taoist meditation, you're going more into your body. So that you can sit on a chair and your body is back very straight and you're perched on the edge of the chair and feet firmly planted.
And do
And
you
when you,
prefer chair-based to sitting on the floor on a cushion?
yes, yes, unless you're very propped up, because over time it wrenches the knees, especially in Western people. The hips and knees get wrenched.
Yeah, and I guess I do sort of feel a lot of Westerners just aren't able to sit cross-legged on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to do my pranayama breath work in a chair. And the 80-year-old from Nepal that teaches me Sangita does it on a mat. And she's perfectly comfortable. So I can't. So anyway, I've also studied the microcosmic orbit breath.
Yeah, I
So
did come across it's a Yang Ming sort of has some books. There's lots of books actually, but I
he's
think he
got
has.
lots of books. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's a good friend of mine. He's a great guy. Uh, so I don't remember if I learned it from one of his books. I can't even remember what. No, I learned this one from what's his name in Chicago. Um, Wason Liao is
okay.
Wason. Yeah, he just described it in his book. So you inhale from the navel, go up the back, go over the top of the head to the tip of the tongue on the upper palate, and then you breathe down conception vessel and return to the navel. So you're making that cycle. And that's the energetic cycle. If you're trying to fall asleep at night, you want to reverse the cycle. So you want to inhale up the front. And I tell students to imagine zipping up a jacket. And then you go down the back. So that's a sedating cycle.
Oh, okay, no, I've
You
not heard that
can
before.
do that.
Yeah,
You can do that while you're laying in bed. And I've had the experience where I've been doing it and doing it. And, my mind is very active, and I have a hard time falling asleep a lot. And so I'll do that and go, oh damn, this isn't working. I'll do that. So boring, so boring. And then I'll wake up and go, God, I guess it worked. It's the next day already, because you fell asleep doing this boring thing.
I mean, do you think
So
meditation works for everyone, or do you think there's some people that just
yeah,
aren't cut out for meditation in a
no,
way?
I think that works. I think it works for everyone. The only person it wouldn't work for is someone refusing to try it. And
Yeah,
then it doesn't work for,
it's not a
well,
magic pill though, is it? It's not like I do some meditation and all my problems go away. I think a lot of people are looking for a magic
there's
pill.
nothing like that. That
Yeah.
is bull crap. Yeah, like here's the perfect diet, and this is what, follow these rules, and that's a bunch of crap. Um, yeah,
I guess a little bit like standing. It is difficult in a way, and maybe it almost we've sort of been socialized in sort of capitalist countries that almost discourage that kind of practice, I guess. Or do you disagree with
in
this?
Western society, it's
That people sort of expect, oh, I put time into something, I get money for it, I get something for it, and it seems not anti-capitalist, but I guess it is maybe in a way anti that you're not consuming.
there's plenty of capitalists that meditate
There's
first.
plenty of people selling meditation.
I can't stand those people. Ugh, what those? I
And
can't.
I think also it is.
Mind Valley or that Mind Spring guy that pops up on Facebook. I just want to strangle that
I
guy.
do kind of find that I do really like meditation, but usually if somebody teaches meditation, I kind of think, oh, I want to stay away from that. That somebody who wants to be a guru is unsuitable for that task, and often I feel maybe not wanting to pick on California, but of the sort of West Coast sort of self-help
Right ahead.
kind of
Go right
types.
ahead.
I kind of feel, oh, those guys, they're kind of more
I
screwed up
pick
than the
on
people they're trying to
California.
help, aren't they? You know, um and I guess once you start, I guess, trying to sell meditation, that it in a way that you're on the wrong track, aren't you? When you're trying to make money from a spiritual practice, or
Well, I mean,
it's a fine line.
the first time I learned it was at a Japanese Zen monastery in LA, and I've written about this. I was training very hard in kung fu then, and I was wearing my kung fu outfit. My mom used to hand sew them for me. I was a teenage girl, and I trained so hard that I stopped getting my period, and I because of losing body fat, I guess at that age, and so we were in there, and there was a guy with a stick, and you had to sit in a very strict posture, and he'd come around and hit you with the shoulder, and you had to keep your eyes closed, and I kept peeking, and I was like, what is, it was interesting. It was really, I was reading books about it. I was so curious. And then it was one of those, it was the Rinzai, not the Soto. So they have a riddle. So they brought you
Koans, don't they? Kind of, or cones, or koan, that
they
K O
give you a
A
riddle.
N. Yeah, I actually
So
have a book here that's got that. I haven't read it yet, but I have a book on those ready, waiting to read.
so it was so one by one you had an private audience with this guy who was visiting the I forget what you call the place, the Zen temple from Japan, and spoke very little English. And so I walked in and I was full of anticipation, like, whoa, what's gonna happen? And he said, are you a guru? And I thought, oh, why is he asking me if I'm a guru? And I was just totally baffled. And then, I pondered this, and I just thought, was that my riddle? I was just really baffled. And then I thought I pondered this for a long time. And then I realized he was saying, are you a girl? Because I had
Obviously, in
short.
Japanese, the rut and lut sounds in Japanese, they're different, aren't they? They struggle with the rut and lut sounds. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a fun,
But
amusing
was
moment.
that just was that supposed to be a riddle for you to think, or was that just was he genuinely not sure?
He was asking me if I was a girl. I thought
Yeah,
I was going in there to get a riddle. I don't
yeah.
know. Just a
So I know there's
couple.
lots of them about moo, aren't they? And what does your face look like before you're born? And
That would have been cool. I don't know. I got a dumb one. Are you a girl? Truthfully, I did have a giant identity crisis at the time.
well, maybe that's what he was trying to get you to ponder. Maybe.
He just couldn't figure out what I was. That's what I truly believe that. But anyway, that's that age when you're trying to like reach out into all these directions. And
Yeah, I mean, I guess with
within a few years, I learned standing meditation from Guo. who only did the one on one foot, the holding the, holding the, I would say Norway and Canada, and not holding the equator and not holding the South Pole or the North Pole, or just the one. And I didn't understand it. We used to do it at when it was still dark outside for 1 hour, looking at the sun coming up before they had built what was it called? The Transamerica building. So the San Francisco skyline wasn't all built up like it is now. It was still pretty quaint back then in the 60s.
Okay, I'm trying to think if I've got any more questions left for you. I have to sort of get. I've got to work this afternoon, so I have to
You know what?
get going. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Yeah.
You do want to know what the value of standing is, because
Yeah.
so let me, because I felt like I could help people out with this, because people are reaching out in all kinds of directions, like the
It is a difficult sell in many ways, though, isn't it? It's you used the word, it's an austere practice. If you're going to try and convince people that they should be standing still for hours on end. I mean, obviously the structure, the leg strength, the awareness would be.
It doesn't take any leg strength, really. I mean, you can
But
do
it builds
it
up, like if you're, it's better than sitting for your body, in a sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely for sure. So,
but in terms of if you're able to hold the posture for a long time, you have to sort of find the most biomechanically efficient place for your body, or
no, don't fill your head with anything like that. I mean, you don't want your shoulders to hunch up. And I'll tell you one good thing to work on while you're not moving is wherever you feel tension, without moving, just try to let it go. So it's a constant series of letting go, like, because your mind is going to go where you feel tension, and it's usually in the delts, and then you just hold the position but release the tension. And that's a very good practice, just to let constant letting go. And I would, I had recently had hip surgery, and I stood a lot to because you can stand in that poised position even when you're recovering from surgery. It's a good way to start cultivating your chi and getting back to actual exercise. So I can't recommend standing enough. I mean, it's a vital, important practice. It's the form within the form. The old masters say small movement is better than large movement, and no movement is better than small movement. And you can ponder that one while you stand.
Yeah. And I guess that I quite like is it look for stillness within movement, or movement within stillness, or maybe it was the other way around. But
well, what Jan said, and I don't know who he was quoting, but he said he had a way of defining internal and external. It was beautiful. This is one of my favorite quotes. He said, the external styles is the energy of movement, and the internal styles are the movement of energy.
That's quite deep. I have to ponder that one for a while. That's quite deep.
I'm pretty sure Jan's. I don't know if Jan made that up or if he's quoting someone. I think if he is quoting an old master, you should credit them.
Yeah.
He's just over in Walnut Creek. I've never met him, but yeah, he teaches a few towns up the way. I've had some of his students come to me, but I never gloated.
Yeah, is this Yang Dring Min that you're talking about, or which?
Jan.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Dutch name. Yeah.
Oh, the writer of the Warriors of Stillness. Okay.
Right. Yeah. He's local. Anything you're curious about? You can dance. Oh, I can.
Okay, I do have one more question for you that from my big list of questions that I had.
Okay.
I guess we're talking about martial arts, and I guess does size matter? I mean, I think you're reasonably sort of petite or smaller lady in the martial arts. How much does size matter? If especially if
So
you're in more of a self-defense situation.
yeah,
Obviously you
I
might
can
come
I
across
can
someone
tell
who's
you
got 40, 50
exactly.
kilos on you. Yeah.
So if in Tai Chi, if you have to, this is my philosophy, but didn't come from me. I, would never have been smart enough to think of all this stuff. If you have to use strength, it's not Tai Chi. So if Tai Chi therefore is the use, I have three qualities and I emphasize soft is the top one. It's three S's: soft, slow, sink. And it doesn't matter what style you do, but you apply that to whatever style you're doing. So with as little effort as possible. So the softness, I mean, originally Tai Chi was called Cotton Fist. And as it evolved over time, the frame became softer and softer. And you look at Wu style and you're like, it's like, what is that? One of my favorite practitioners, he doesn't like me to mention his name because he doesn't want to get a bunch of people trying to beat him up in the park. So and he said, please don't use my real name in your book. But he's Wu style and he never uses strength and he moves everybody. He's like a Bay Area legend. So there's a lot of open push hands going on around here. So
Not called Tony by any chance, is he?
it's not Tony.
Not Tony. Okay.
He's a French guy.
Okay.
He's very elegant.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I mean, I'll I'll be teaching in Paris this February. Uh, so there's a large group of very serious practitioners of the 64 form, and they're much better than the Americans, really, because the French are. This is again sounds like a horrible generality, but they just take it very seriously and they don't mystify it. They're just sensible about it and they do it very well. They want to learn some advanced stuff that I have that they never got, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But I mean, Peter Kwok was really a brilliant dude, and he taught every system had a qigong that went with it or a meditation and applications forms. So it's not like I'm some kind of genius. He taught me Tai Chi applications. There's an 88. We've got almost 60,000 views on that YouTube. I'm doing it in what was that, like 1982 or something, in a park with a comrade Sifu of mine who has the Kung Fu school in New Jersey, Al Bender. And we're performing that form together, and the Shaolu and the Daolu. So learning these application stuff, it's then, oh, that's how you do it.
Yeah, and then
So,
the applications give the form meaning, don't they? It's
oh
surprising how many
yeah,
people don't teach any application, but then it's kind of meaningless if you don't know
yeah,
what it's for.
I feel like that's so much richer when you understand application. So, there's that beautiful saying when you do your form, you imagine your opponent, and when you have an opponent, you imagine no opponent. So that's another really good one.
That's a nice one. I've not heard that one before,
That is
actually,
a
but I like
really
that
good
one.
one. Yeah, that is a really good one. So, in terms of when so this thing about trusting your students. So if you're teaching someone young who's bigger and stronger than you, and you're teaching them technique, they'll be able to beat you because they're going to stand on your shoulders.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I
In that
mean,
case, when I asked you about does size matter, I thought your first answer was kind of like, oh no, if you have softness,
skill,
it shouldn't
and
matter.
they don't,
Um,
and they don't. If they have less skill, I can be smaller and
I mean,
weaker.
having longer arms is a huge advantage because there's a range at which I
Not,
can
but
reach when you can't reach me.
you get inside the long arms,
Yeah.
you know.
But
So I
having 50 or 60
like
kilos on
clothes.
someone,
I like clothes.
if you're up against somebody who's 140 kilos and has good coordination, good awareness, good training, that surely that must be a
It's daunting. I remember in class once, I had he was a Marine on leave, and he was 6'4", very lanky. And he just got me by, he said, "What would you do if I did this?" And he just grabbed me and picked me up and lifted me over his head. But then another time, a wrestler, this was at Rutgers University at a party full of professors, and he grabbed me, and he was a philosophy professor that had gotten into Rutgers on a wrestling scholarship, and he was drunk, and he had me up on his shoulder, and before he could throw me down, I just reached between his legs and grabbed his balls, but he couldn't feel it because he was drunk. So I mean, every situation is different, let me just say.
Yeah.
You cannot generalize, and it
Every
makes you
person is
kind of
different
like
as
it.
well. Every body
I win
is
some,
different. Yeah.
lose some. I mean, I don't know if you can see the scar on my lip, but I got, oh no, here it is, right here. Can you see it?
Uh, not very well. It's
Well, this was pretty funny. It was when I had the first iteration of the Little River Kung Fu School in Bangor, Pennsylvania. And I used to still go to New York quite a bit. And I got into a fight in Washington Square Park. And it was a drunk guy and his buddy. They were drinking beer. It was a black dude that had a hard body, like, knock on wood kind of body. And he was cursing at me because I was teaching a girl. And he was saying, "You fucking bitches, blah, blah, blah." And I lost my temper. I don't pretend that I don't. I have a bad temper. I always have. So, but you should never, this is already a no-no. And I always said to my students, don't use your kung fu on anybody. So when I came back to class with a bloody scab lip, they said, "Sifu," uh, I lost that fight. Anyway, what happened was I said, "All right, I'll spar you," because I wasn't going to be gun shy. He said my forms were stupid, or he was putting my, I had to defend it. I got all ruffled, and I walked up to him and I said, "All right, I will pull everything if you do." And he agreed to that. So we're going, and I was pretty good at Tai Chi by then, and I had grabbed his wrist and off balanced him. And he was doing some weird capoeira stuff, and I was like, "Oh my God." And he did a handstand and was kicking me from it. And then all of a sudden he did a kung fu move, and I was watching it instead of reacting to it, instead of responding to it. And he crouched down low, and then he just came up full force and slapped me in the lip with a back slap, and my tooth went through my tooth smashed into my lip, between my tooth and his back of his palm, and blood just, those areas bleed a lot. And what was really gross is the whole crowd just went, "Ooh," because definitely it's New York, and a crowd gathered. And I was just so put off, and I went to look for ice and ended the fight. But they wanted me to like make a Bruce Lee sound and lick the blood and keep fighting, and yeah. Anyway, that was that fight. I lost that one.
Yeah.
I won the one with the Taekwondo girl, and I never hurt her. So, the power of Tai Chi.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, thanks a lot. Maybe we'll leave it at that note with tales of your
All right.
fights. So
Nice
thank you very
talking
much
to you.
for taking the time and reaching out to be on the podcast. Yeah, it might take me a few days to edit the videos together, and I'll send you the video
I
when I've
appreciate this. I really do.
edit it
It's,
together. So
it's
thanks a lot for your time, and
well,
yeah. Okay, have a nice evening.
nice call.
Okay, bye.